Hello and welcome to yet another Q&A of Kashish Mumbai International Queer Film Festival. Today we'll be speaking to the wonderful director and protagonist of the amazing film Well-Rounded. The film screening at Kashish 2021 is supported by Consulate General of Canada and the Canadian Filmmakers Distribution Center, CFMDC. Well-Rounded is an edgy, hilarious, unapologetically raunchy and sometimes tear-jerking. Well-Rounded brings you your new super queer XXL for racialized BFFs in comedy, fashion, health, and research to help combat those pesky systematic fat phobias that threaten to make you hate yourself. And to speak to the director and the protagonist of Well-Rounded, we have ANISHA SHARMA, a creative director and writer from Mumbai, who has worked on numerous fiction and non-fiction shows. She is a proud member of the queer community and identifies as a lesbian. She has also been part of the Kashish preview team in the previous years. So welcome, Anisha, and over to you.
Okay, hello. Thank you so much, Sheila, first of all, for asking me to do this. I'm so thankful I got to watch the film. It's fantastic and absolutely relatable on so many levels, which we're going to deep dive into. Before we start, let's do a quick introduction to everyone on the panel. So first off, we have Shana Myra. She's the director of the film. Shana is an award-winning writer. She's a curator, a recovered festival director, and community arts programmer who's cultivated arts and social and dialogue for social change for over 20 years. Well-Rounded is Shana's first feature-length film. Welcome, Shana. Nice to meet you.
Thank you. Hi.
Next up, we have Lydia Okello. Lydia is a model, stylist, and writer-editor who was born in Uganda, moved to Norway as a toddler, and now calls Vancouver, BC home. Hi, Lydia. Welcome to the panel. Hi. And last up, we have Ivory. Ivory is a Toronto-based multidisciplinary artist. She's a graduate of Randolph College for the Performing Arts and leads a storied career as a singer, an actor, a dancer, a model, and a body-positive advocate. I'm not done. She's an archer, an axe thrower, a fire breather, and she boasts a bag of tricks, which is sure to wow any crowd. She was crowned a Miss Canada Plus in 2007 and has continued her activism as a plus-size entertainer and advocate for over 10 years, pushing for change with intersectional feminism, body positivity, queer advocacy, and an outspoken message of love at all costs. She is a founding member of the Succulent Six, Canada's team of curvy super sheroes, and proud member of Les Femmes Fatales, Canada's premier burlesque troupe for women of color. You can follow her antics on Instagram and Twitter at pureivory.ca and online at www.pureivory.ca. I hope I got all of that. Hello.
Hi, you got all of that.
I did.
You did it fantastic. You can introduce me anytime.
Oh my God, we'll exchange details later. All right, so welcome everyone. First off, I'd like to say what a film. I'm really, really so privileged that I got to watch it. And I've not just watched it one time. I've watched it so many times because there are just so many things that spoke to me personally. I don't know if I think I'll come out as fat as well on today's session. And it was really beautiful because it just hit so many levels that, made me remember things and sort of rethink a lot of things and really open my mind. So I'm so grateful to have been able to watch the film. Let's get started with our questions. So firstly, I'm going to throw to Shana. If you could tell me what were your experiences that led you to making the film?
My experiences, I think, I had to come to terms with the fact that I had been fat in semi-public roles, and I hadn't used my position publicly to talk about fatness. I had programmed some queer films and, working in the queer community and working in progressive sort of activist circles. I was growing increasingly surprised at the amount of kind of diet culture and unchecked fat phobia, kind of even within our kind of progressive activist circles. And I was really surprised at myself for not being more of a loudmouth, because I can be a loudmouth on almost any issue. But I think historically, because I have always felt so silenced and so ashamed outside of my family about my body, I just couldn't find the words. So when I was thinking about what documentary I wanted to make, I thought about the words of an old writing mentor who said, write what scares you. So in this case, it would be, you know, take on a film project that scares you. And it really did scare me. And so I looked for people like Ivory and Lydia, and woohoo, I found them. And they're my unofficial kind of fat mentors. So this project for me was hugely personal and hugely liberating. And Anisha, just so, I mean, just hearing your words and saying that it affected you in a similar way is just so gratifying to me. And that was really the only goal in making this project, was to kind of uncover some of these things, tease out some of these conversations, and see people who are living large and proudly, and just show some pluralism in body size on screen. And, you know, for myself, just spending so many hours with these folks in the editing room, just, you know, hearing them, but also seeing them on screen, seeing the way they hold themselves, talk about their bodies, just extraordinarily life-changing.
That's beautiful. What I really loved about the film was, you know, mostly you see this conventional talking heads format, and I love that you introduced so many different ways of storytelling in the film. So you had, you know, the animated bits featuring, of course, Lydia and Ivory and the other subjects in the film. And I just wanted to know, what was the process behind the animation? You know, how.
Well, I was really lucky to find Alexandra Honer, who works out of the UK, and we've never met in person. We did everything on Zoom, and pre-COVID, we made the film, but it seems very contemporary now, our process. And we just talked about kind of moments that were very resonant, and we wanted to find ways of demonstrating them visually that weren't necessarily through realism. So we didn't have to kind of reenact things that we could have just filmed. We wanted to show things like, you know, like Lydia feeling submerged in a swimming pool, feeling that kind of the unpleasantness of the aspects of weight, but then also feeling buoyed by a swimming pool. So some of these ways, and then of course, Ivory's story about the Cooter Nippelstein and feeling empowered by the fat burlesque. So that was a bit more realism, but with such whimsy. We really just picked kind of key moments for each character. Candy Palmater was not thrilled with the idea of being animated, and so we found creative ways of animating Candy's scenes, because Candy's name is Candy, and there was so much in Candy's story to try and communicate through animation. And I think having the challenge of then communicating parts of her story without rendering her as a specific kind of humanoid character was another fun one. So I ended up, I think, enriching some of Alexandra's work there too.
Broadly, I think Well-Rounded is sort of an exploration of the ramifications of being fat in today's world. So is this something you would originally sort of plan, that you wanted to, like, you know, hit all these, like, get this all done in a checklist? Or was it something that as you worked with the individuals that you ended up featuring in the film, you sort of developed?
Well, all I planned was really thinking about people who live their lives publicly as large people, because to me that was a bit more interesting than just random fat people with big thoughts, because I thought having that aspect of being public and interacting with people. Of course, we started with what I call the troll scroll, with the social media mean comments, because I think it does take an extra element of bravery to be a racialized fat person out in the world, unapologetic. And from there, the conversations took us where they did. I did know that I wanted to have a health expert talk to us, because I could imagine the conversation should people who aren't looking for a liberatory experience find the film. I could feel the but what about their health conversation. So I wanted to be able to bring in an expert who could preemptively say, okay, this is all the cultural baggage you already know. Let me tell you what I know based on my expertise and my thousands of hours of research. And hopefully that's kind of a drop in the bucket of some of the messaging people will get over their lifetimes.
Shana, how did you get people to be that raw and open with you?
I think the better question is, how were they so comfortable?
Yeah,
I think,
definitely.
you know, again, it kind of goes back to, I researched who I invited to be part of the film. So, you know, I do take some credit for being a good curator in that way. And there's something about Ivory and Lydia that is just so warm and so vulnerable simultaneously. So part of their strength is different than the kind of strength that you see modeled so often, because you know that there's a history there, and you can see that they've lived some life already. And I think I'm trying to be very candid. I told them it was my first project. I told them kind of why I wanted to make the project, and then tried to make the interview process feel comfortable. But these things are always rushed. There's a camera in your face, there's lighting in your face. So in a sense, it's kind of lucky that it worked out in that way. But I also felt very warmly towards them. So I'm hoping some of that was a part of it, but I really don't know. I would feel squinchy and tight and terrible if someone had a camera in my face the way I did for them. But these two are performers and professionals.
Yeah, exactly. We've got a couple of pros on board. Lydia, our introduction, or my introduction to you is when you say, I just wanted to know I wasn't weird. When was the first time you think you felt comfortable with yourself, and did fashion play a role in that?
For me, I've had kind of an interesting relationship to clothes and my body and like my self-esteem or comfort, because I have, ever since I was pretty small, I've always expressed myself through clothing. That's always been a mode of expression and kind of my primary mode of expression. But I think as I became a preteen, I really struggled with what my body looked like versus what I wanted to express, and like kind of marrying those two things. So I think, I don't know if I have like a specific moment necessarily that I felt comfortable. I think it's been a series of moments. One thing that stands out to me is I went on a trip to Fashion Week in 2010 with like a website that I was blogging on at the time. And I'd never been to somewhere that big. I was so excited to be in New York for the first time. And I was really surprised that that website had chosen me as one of the people to go, because for me, I felt like how can I be fashionable? Like I love clothes, but I know that my body doesn't fit, you know, kind of the stereotype of fashion. And I had like this like floral vintage dress that like fit me perfectly and was just like very much my style at the time. And I remember just like walking around in New York, like very bright-eyed and naive, and like wearing this dress that I really loved and feeling like, wow, like maybe I don't need to change. I think a seed of that thought, like I can find ways to be me and not alter myself, and still kind of represent this like idealized version of myself that I always felt like I was pursuing. So I think maybe that's like one of the first sort of touch points of that feeling, but it's been a really long journey, and I don't know that I will ever get to a point where I'm just like, yes, it's all great, and I don't think about this at all. For me, I don't think that's realistic, but I think along the way there are different sort of, like checkpoints or moments where I feel embodied in all the expressions of myself, including my physical form, and that is really affirming.
My next question is for everybody, but we'll start, I think, let's go with Lydia answering first. Did anything change for you personally through the process of making the film, after watching the film? Was there anything that was there any switch in you when, through the process and after you watched it?
Being invited to be a part of this film and then seeing the finished product, I think it really showed me how much of a journey I had been on, and also it just really touched me, if I'm being honest. Maybe that's a little bit corny, but it did, because I felt so seen and heard, and I felt really lucky to be included with so many folks with such different experiences. And for me, I guess it added more fuel to my fire of speaking to my personal experience, and also seeking out experiences that aren't like mine, even if someone is queer and fat and a person of color. It really just affirmed how important those stories are and how little I had seen of those stories in queer media and how vital they were, because to even be a part of this project and, you know, really kind of deep dive my own experience and my relationship to my body and my queerness and how those things intersect, and even my like cultural relationship to my body, I think spurred something in me to keep diving deeper and to uplift those stories and to focus on those stories, and also just ask for more from queer media and not just settle for, you know, the usual narrative. Because I think it is easy to accept the status quo because queer folks have been so hidden for so much of history. Yeah, that made me really happy, and that made me really proud. And I'm so glad that something like this can exist in the world, and its existence means more and more of these types of stories and projects can be created and brought to the forefront. So yeah, I would say that's the change I felt being a part of Well-Rounded.
Shana?
I think everything changed for me after making the film. It was, you know, every interview kind of left me feeling like I had made a deep connection, kind of feeling more comfortable talking about weight, talking about some of these kind of histories that I think we all share of having kind of shame loaded onto us, and then slowly finding ways to disregard that external pressure. There's kind of a constant external pressure of shame put upon us. We have failed somehow in our bodies. And I think the film helped me understand how extraordinarily great that that pressure is, and how it can self-limit us for all of our lives. And I think, you know, especially Ivory and Lydia helped me kind of see through some of that. And, you know, literally just spending so many hours with them in the editing room. So not only did we get to have the time in the interview, but then it was, you know, just that repetition and that real closeness I ended up feeling. Like I have spent hundreds more hours with them than they have with me at this point. And it was like free therapy for me. So thank you both. But yeah, and same with the other folks in the film, and the two experts who helped contextualize it to some extent. So that's helpful too. Yeah.
Ivory?
I think what changed for me is that it made me realize how much more work we have to do to tell these stories. It was an honor to be selected and to be able to be given this platform to tell my personal story, but also to have it juxtaposed with other people who have very similar lived experiences, although we're living completely different lives. And then to watch that so lovingly edited and curated into the film that it became was wonderful, but also frustrating, because it's only a snapshot of all of the things we really want to touch on, bring to the forefront, want to amplify. And, you know, you can't make a 10-hour documentary. It's not a thing. But we have enough material that I bet we could have and kept going. It could have been a series. It needs more time. It needs more media attention, and not just from queer media, but from international media. And I think for that, it really lit a fire under my ass, so to speak, to say these stories need to be told, and they need to be told in their you know, full depth. They need to get a chance to get more well-rounded. Hey, you know, because we deserve better. And that was the change, is that I already felt like, you know, in so many different aspects of my life, there's been this bubbling desire and need to get our stories out there and to be heard and to make real change. But film is an incredible medium for getting stories told quickly, because we live in a world where people have 7 seconds of attention span. 7 seconds. You have 7 seconds to make your point. And this is an incredible medium to be able to do that. And we need to do more. We need to fund it, and we need to put it out there, because it deserves to be told.
What for you are some of the most harmful stereotypes about fat people you'd like to combat with Well-Rounded?
Oh, I mean, I think we all know because we've all been steeped in it. I mean, I would really love to turn the question on you, Anisha, and kind of learn a little bit about how this film sits in Indian culture, because my hope is that in some places this film is irrelevant because some of these standards do not exist there. But you know, I think it's everything we've been told all of our lives. We're lazy, we're not productive. Dr. Jenny Ellison in the film, I think, so eloquently dismantled white supremacy in talking about the Protestant ethic, in which, you know, North American society and Western Europe has been kind of founded on, which says if you don't prove your worth by showing that you don't do anything to excess, you work really hard, you don't eat too much, you're not slovenly, you're not sloth, you're kind of pristine and small and white, right? That's how it should look outwardly, and that shows that you are meritorious in the eyes of God, right? The foundations have kind of soaked in. People don't remember the origins of it, but really the knee-jerk reaction to fatness is that something is wrong with you and you're showing kind of weakness and grossness in your character. But it's not true. But I think, you know, in a second, I can conjure up what all those external meanings are because I've lived with that sense my whole life, right?
Lydia, you speak about not always being a cheery person, you know, and that really got me thinking about how there's this sort of expectation of fat people that you always have to be like super jovial and jolly and affable, you know. And I'd like to ask all of you that have you guys been a victim of this trope in any way, that, you know, you feel like I just can't have a bad day because people are like, "Are you're fat, so why don't you just be happy all the time? You should have something to be happy about, because to me it doesn't seem like you do. You know, so just keep doing that." Have you guys ever felt this, or is it just me?
I think that as a defense mechanism, growing up and not wanting to be teased, you learn to be funny because then people like you. You're relatable. The funny fat guy or fat gal or fat person is not just a trope, it is armor. It's something that we learn very quickly how to not get teased when we're younger. And that's by being funny, because if they're laughing with you, they're not laughing at you, right? And it does get exhausting, that you always have to be on, you always have to be hyper aware of how the world is perceiving you, because at any moment they can turn on you, and you've been, you know, schooled on that since a young age. And it's extra layered if you are you know, a person of color, especially if you are a Black woman. I'm not always Black presenting. Some days I am. When I wear my natural hair, the world perceives me as a Black woman, and being an angry Black woman is a trope as well. And so we've got that sort of double thing happening there, where it's the miserable fat person and an angry Black woman. Oh my God, rid of them, right? And it does get exhausting and weigh on you that you cannot have a bad day, or otherwise the world could turn on a dime. But I think, like any other human, we have to allow ourselves the room to be whatever it is that we're feeling that day and wherever we're at, and the world can take it. Oh my God, you know, thin white people have been doing that for years. We can too. And it's like giving yourself that space to just love yourself where you're at. And if you're crabby that day, so be it. And the world can deal, you know?
Lydia.
Yeah, I think for me, definitely touching on the point of like being both a fat person and a Black person, specifically kind of policing my own emotional output when I'm in public, I've realized is a huge part of my experience. And like even when, weirdly, when we started wearing masks, I realized how often I use my smile to disarm strangers. And it made me really sad, because I was like, wow, I didn't know that that was actually like an unconscious tool for me to move through the world in a way that felt like it protected me. You know, speaking to that armor piece, like that felt like a form of protection. And I was like, I don't have that anymore. I can't quickly be like, it's okay, I'm an okay Black person, it's okay, I'm not a threat to you. See, you can tell because you can see my smile, I'm not a threat. And that's been something that for me, I mean, I think I'm still working through that and working through ways of feeling okay with being pissed off or being grumpy, or if a stranger says something to me that I don't like, not feeling like I have to placate them and not feeling like I have to accept what they're saying because I'm scared of being the angry Black person. And that's not to say that it's like easy or goes well, but I deserve to be able to express my emotions. I deserve that just as much as anybody else, and I shouldn't have to regulate my emotions to please other people so that they think I'm acceptable. So to what Ivory's saying, you know, learning that scope of expression is not only allowed, but encouraged. Like, you, even if the world doesn't believe that you should be able to do that, I am really trying to work on like reinforcing that idea for myself, because I realized how deeply internalized that specific trope is, and how deeply internalized using that as a defense mechanism has been for me. And yeah, so it's definitely something that like I'm working through, and is a real issue.
How did you go about choosing the music? Was that also very conscious in terms of, I want to represent, plus size women, or, queer individuals? Was that something that was a conscious process, or is it just, this music is amazing?
Well, the music's amazing.
I mean, yes, it is.
Yeah. No, I was looking for music that could keep pace with the awesome people in the film. So it had to be rousing, anthemic, unapologetic, bold. And then my partner suggested, well, what about this Kimortal song? And it was clearly the perfect song. And but I had a moment of pause where I was like, oh, are people not going to really get the feel of it because it's called Sad Femme Club? Like, is there like a little thing there that people won't resonate with? But I mean, obviously not, because it's the greatest song and it's so rousing and, like lead us to revolution kind of song. And luckily, Kimortal, who's a Filipinx, like local genderqueer killer artist, said, yes, use my song. So that was big luck on our part. And boy, did we use the hell out of it. In my opinion, we could have just, used it 100 times over, like underneath everyone. But then also Sam Davidson, who's a friend, did the musical score. So the original stuff that is kind of more gentle in between and underneath, and worked really closely with him to make sure that none of it was kind of this like sad violin sound in the background, which I think was kind of the original temptation to be like, oh, someone's talking about something difficult, let's put sad violin. And it was like, no, these people are the ultimate kind of warriors, right? Like, look at what they've gone through, make the music more interesting. And I think that was a huge part of the success of the film. And then also another local band called Red Hot Icicles Burning on Fire, who are friends.
The film makes a great case for representation, right? So you're seeing fat people in places where we've always thought they shouldn't be: runways, ballet, television, to some extent. Most of the stories we do see, however, of course, fall under this trauma porn category, where you've got fat people who are sad and morose, and everything is crumbling. And do you think that we're stagnating in terms of telling fat women's stories, and how far have we come and where can we go?
Well, stagnating, I mean, we'd have to be inundated to be stagnating, so I don't think we are. In terms of trauma porn, I've thought a lot about this because as a former festival director and curator, I am sensitive to that. I think trauma porn is exactly what I tried not to do. And I think trauma porn is essentially exploitative and reduces people to one part of their story. Is that all of us have a journey and a story and an arc. And so in order to understand how fierce these folks are and what they've had to overcome, I did have to show some of their struggles. And I did go back to everyone and ask, like, are you sure you want part of this struggle to be in the film? Because a lot of struggle that we could have shown could have been much milder, right? not feeling attractive, not, you know, feeling accepted in particular like schools of practice, all of that. So it was something that was definitely very much on my mind. And at the same time, because these folks are so public about their stories, including their traumas and their triumphs and sharing their talent, I didn't want to be the person who decided for them not to include very difficult parts of their story. And I did carefully try to pair it with the sections where Dr. Janet Tomiyama talks about the extraordinary effects of stigma. And so I tried to pair all of those sections together. So we see how these external pressures can affect people who are even as kind of bold and strong, and people who I think all of us would want to kind of emulate for the viewer to see, look at what they have lived through, I think is very powerful. But none of those questions came with very easy answers for me. So I tried very hard to show some of the nuance in how we presented those clips. But again, it's up to Ivory and Lydia, who, you know, it's a very big leap of trust to be filmed by someone, because boy, can everything you say can be manipulated and can be emphasized in different ways by whoever's getting to cut those images together. So my sincere hope is that they feel like the range of their story within a very short amount of time was treated with care and respect.
For me, I'm so used to like getting to the grit right off the gate that it didn't disarm me at all. And it didn't offend me at all. For me, I've found so much power in juxtaposing my grittiness with my, you know, fun, jovial, lively, gregarious nature. I think it's part of what adds to my depth. And I guess, you know, when I reflect on it more, yeah, as a society, our lust for trauma porn is probably what got me, you know, toughened up around that and used to hitting on those as much as I hit on the highs. But it's always been my truth. So I think, how do we learn from this? How do we grow from this? We give people the chance to be the authors and the tellers of their own stories. And rather than just centering on their traumatic experience, let them center the story. And how do we do this? I don't know. More funding into the arts, more funding into film, more funding into independent projects that need to be backed so that they're not independent anymore, so that we get to curate our own voices and work closely with teams who are curating them and are given more time, more screen time, and more funds behind it to be able to not just center on the, you know, the trauma porn, but still give reverence to that experience if it was that catalyst that catapulted you to this next sort of higher level of being awesome. You know, like I could remove all the shit parts in my story, and sorry, I totally just sweared. I could remove all the terrible parts in my story. But then I don't know that I would have hit the heights that I've hit personally and professionally. I don't know I'd love myself this deeply, because I've always believed, you know, you have to hit rock bottom at some point to bounce. So how do you tell both sides without overly gratifying the other one or making the other one seem like candy pop? You know what I mean? And it takes a keen hand. Yeah. So happy that Shanna was that hand this time.
No, it's a real, this film could be cut 10 times over, and it could have,
in fact, one of the questions one of the questions I haven't asked is in fact about what didn't make it to the final cut and what was left on the edit.
So much.
I'm sure I can imagine the wealth of stories you do have with you that we haven't had the privilege to see yet. Lydia, would you like to talk about representation? You also spoke about fashion, you know, and how there is so much fat phobia in the fashion world.
I definitely agree with both what Shanna and Ivory were touching on about specifically allowing fat folks to tell their own stories, because I do find, as someone who works in fashion, there is oftentimes clearly a thin person trying to represent a fat person. And sometimes that comes across well. A lot of the time it really flops and it's very transparent. And I think because a lot of folks don't have experience with how to represent fat people in a way that's affirming, in a way that isn't tokenizing as well, and being like, wow, I accept you. You look okay to me. That's great. Like that sort of representation, I think that often happens, unfortunately, in the fashion world, and we haven't really gotten to a place where there's enough fat folks in the room or queer folks in the room or just like marginalized folks in the room to be like, hey, that's not the way we should do this. Have you thought about this different way? And I think, yeah, for me, like I just really have a hard time with sort of a bit of self-congratulatory attitudes that I think a lot of different spaces and industries have come to in terms of diversity or inclusion, where because we have experienced a social change in accepting who is represented and accepting what we expect from other people in society, I think there is a big danger to be like, great, we've done it. We don't need to do anything else because we did it that one time and everybody saw, yay. And like that sort of attitude is so limiting. And I think probably for everyone in this room, because of the identities that we hold, we know how much is not seen, how much is underrepresented, how much more there is to explore and express and have at the forefront. And I think to kind of the trauma porn side, I think for me, what I felt in this project and would love to see more of is just people who are whole, fat people whose story has nothing to do with being fat people whose stories are about their lived experience, and we don't always have to focus in on this is the troubles they experience because of their fatness, because we are all complete people. The experiences and highs and lows of our lives are not just connected to the size of our body. They might intersect with that. There might be specific experiences that are tied to that, but that's not the scope of our being. And yeah, I think that ties into, you know, having fat people in the room, having different marginalized people in the room who understand, hey, you can write a romantic comedy about a fat person or two fat people and not talk about them being fat, because guess what? The viewer can see they're fat. That doesn't need to be the focus of their story, because we, you know, like I guess putting more, giving the audience more agency and assigning the audience more intelligence. I think that's where I get really frustrated currently with what is being represented, because it's like people understand that queer folks exist. People understand that non-white people exist. People understand that fat people exist. So to really just feel like to represent them, the only way to represent them is talking about those specific qualities is such a disservice, I think. And that was, I think before we started the project, that was a fear of mine with this project. And I was so relieved and just happy that was not at all the way it came together. And I think for the viewers watching Well-Rounded, I think that hopefully is something that they take away, that it's a film about fat queer people, but their fatness and queerness is not their existence. It's part of their existence.
What has the response been like for you? Where is it played? What's your favorite something that someone has told you about the film?
Oh, well, I'd be interested to hear what Ivory and Lydia have to say. But for me, I mean, a lot of it, honestly, it's all been through COVID. So in some ways, it's been, you know, comfortably theoretical that there have been so many screenings of this film. So I haven't had the the pleasure and the pain of interacting with audiences after the film. And, because I have worked at film festivals for so long, I know that the best way to test a film is just to stand near the exit, right? And you really hear people's candid opinions. Or people will say things like, actually, I really enjoyed that film, or actually something, there's always, as a sensitive person, there's always a word or a phrase or a frown or something that I would hold on to. So I'm kind of grateful that the film has been entirely screened at digital festivals throughout this painful COVID time. And some people have reached out to me directly, and the Q&As that we've done have been very gratifying, because a lot of people have found a real need for this film. And in some ways, this film is a real kind of 101 in body positivity, body neutrality, whatever, rejecting all this crap. It'll be great when we can do the next one. Yeah, it's really gratifying to talk to so many people who have found it to be a pressure release in some way. And that's how it has been intended, and people who innately understand the intersectionality in the film and the complexity there and in the subjects.
I think for me, what's been surprising and exciting is just like how positive the feedback has been, because you're putting you out there, right? Like, it's, for me, I just kind of pretend like it isn't my story, almost, just to like guard myself a little bit. And so to have folks that I know and strangers be like, this really connected with me, or this really, like I was really touched or moved, or this part made me cry, or I didn't know that and now I do. And that kind of feedback is just, it's so touching to me and so exciting, because that's exactly the kind of work that I want to be involved with. And that's exactly how I would hope the film would meet people, that they would get, at the very least, be entertained, but, maybe take something away or change the way they think about themselves or how they move through the world. So for me, that's been like the best feeling after people have watched the documentary.
For me, what's been wonderful is the amount of accolades that this little film with a big heart has been. I've been lucky to work in the entertainment industry for 17 years, and I've been part of many different projects, many of which had so much heart and so much effort put into them, and sort of were born out into the world and just kind of went, and it seems like with well-rounded, it's, the time is right, minus COVID, but maybe also thanks to COVID, I don't know. But every single time Shanna has taken this film somewhere, pitched it somewhere or whatnot, the way that it's received is the way that you would hope something like this is received. It is loved and accepted and cherished and held onto, and is being uplifted with awards that it absolutely deserves. We need to see fat films winning awards. We need to see fat voices winning awards, and fat queer films taking over film festivals like this all over the world. And what's been lovely is it's getting that reception. It's getting that time. It's getting its little moment in the sun that it deserves. And it almost, what's been lovely is also what's been hard to watch, is that it's getting so much reception positively that I go, damn, I wish COVID wasn't a thing, because we could be there in person doing these Q&As. We could be traveling this little film with a big heart all over the place, and meeting and connecting with all of these people who needed to hear these stories and empathize with them or see themselves in them and want to do the same. But you know what? It's also a lovely internet age where maybe we're getting more people watching this because they are confined to their homes. And so they're able to attend these film festivals that they otherwise may have missed, or are watching more diverse content at the festival than they otherwise may not have gone, to that night's film, because it's such an odd time in history. So yeah, it's been just to see it get this reception, and I just hope it continues, because it deserves it. It's such a wonderful film. You don't have to be
Okay.
biased.
Let me add, my favorite part of how people talk about the film is that everybody knows every person's name, and they'll come and they'll say, "Oh, that thing that Ivory said," or "Oh, Lydia," or "Oh, Joanne," and they talk about everyone in the film as if they've just made a new awesome friend, and they really have. I mean, everyone after one viewing seems to know everyone's story and relate to it, like they have just met someone and are holding on to them for dear life, that they're going to stay in touch. And I think that's just the strength of the warmth and wonderfulness of the people who are in the film. And no wonder people are loving the film, because they just got to meet all of these awesome people through it. And I think it really feels like that. It feels like you just kind of sat in on this exceptional conversation that you don't often get to have in this life. So
that's so true. I think you hit the nail on the head. I also felt like a fly on the wall in one of the most affirming conversations. And I think I'd also like to just say that, to Ivory's point as well, about how perhaps more people get to see it. I know, especially in a country like ours, where many people are afraid to still come out of the closet, and so many people being sort of stuck at home and not necessarily in the best situations. I think what an age like this, a time like this, with the internet and with technology, it allows you to sort of immerse yourself in that queerness for a bit, even if you don't get to do it every single day. Like, I can imagine if I was younger, before I came out to my parents and when I was still living at home, it would have been a little light for me to be able to see this, and for so many levels, as a fat person, as a queer person, as a person, just to be able to watch this and really, really feel like, okay, I can take that little slice of warmth with me, and I can go back to it anytime. I can hear these amazing stories anytime. And I want to thank you so much for that, because I think probably hopefully there'll be that much amazing reception that you'll never understand truly the impact of how many people's lives you've touched with this. And on that note, I'd like to say thank you all so much. It's been a pleasure talking to you. It's been a pleasure to watch the film. Thank you, Sridhar, for asking me to do this one.
You people spoke so beautifully. All of you spoke so beautifully from the heart. The film is always there, but we just got to know behind the scenes what happened, and we got to know more of you personally through this conversation. Thank you so much, Shana, for joining, and Ivory and Lydia for joining this conversation. And thank you, Anisha, so much for hosting this beautiful Q&A. I just want to mention that, this Q&A is going to be live on our social media. So you can put your questions here for Shana, Ivory, and Lydia, and I will make sure that I'll send it to them and they'll answer it. And the festival is not over yet. There are 2 more weekends, 2 more weeks of the festival going on. So please register for the weekend passes, which is still online. So you can just go and register on website, mumbaiqueerfest.com. Thank you so much for joining this Q&A. Thank you, Shana. Thank you, Anisha. Thank you, Ivory and Lydia. Thank you so much.